Um, Good evening, everybody. It is Monday, April 4th, 2022. Welcome to the monthly Housing Committee meeting for Manhattan Community Board 11. I am John Green, the chair of the committee, and I want to welcome everyone to this meeting. First, we have a few ground rules. First of all, no one may speak until granted the floor. Community board members, if you have a question about board business or want to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. If most of you who are on the community board know where the raise hand function is. If you are having a problem with your raise hand function, please let Marlene know, and she will gladly help you rectify it. Okay. The chat function should not be used for community board business. All topics should be made public because this is a public hearing. And if you have any questions, please raise your hand through Zoom. The chat should only be used to exchange information. If you want more information, that anybody that has presented information, they can leave their contact information there, and that's allowable. But particular questions about what's on topic, not in the chat, please. Please keep your questions on topic and brief. This would be greatly appreciated. Members of the public, if you have a question about the subject of the meeting, please use the raise hand function. If you cannot find it or if you're having a problem with it, please let Marlene know, and she will gladly help you as well. Okay, Marlene, you can call the roll if you're ready.
Right, right after you call the meeting to order, I'll call it.
I'm sorry?
Right after you call the meeting to order.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I do have this. Yes, the meeting is called to order at 6:45 p.m. And now, Marlene, if you please.
Okay. Stephanie Arroyo.
Here.
Raja Flores. John Green.
Here.
Robert Harvey.
Here.
Jada Heredia. Alonzo Johnson.
Here.
Robin Krinsky. Beverly Pabon.
Present.
Dawn Sanders.
Here.
And Candy Vivas Vasquez.
Here.
Okay. You have a quorum, John.
Thank you, Marlene. Okay, the agenda was distributed on our website and in advance. And if there are no objections by anybody on the committee, we will adopt the agenda. I don't see any hands at the moment. Fantastic.
Motion to accept.
No need, Candy. Just it's actually done by affirmation. So until we meet again face to face, no need for motions for adoption of the agenda. But thank you. Okay, the March committee minutes, I believe I believe they've been excuse me, been distributed, and if there are no objections from the committee, the March committee minutes will be adopted. And seeing no hands, okay, that's a beautiful thing too. Also, the minutes are adopted. Okay. Before the first announcement that's on the screen, I have a couple of announcements. After talking with with Chair Xavier Santiago, it has been decided that I will be the permanent chair of the Housing Committee. Okay, now that's first. Now, the thing is that since I was vice chair, if I'm going to become chair, there's a need for a new vice chair. And I'm proud to announce that Ms. Dawn Sanders is the new vice chair of the Housing Committee. Congratulations, Dawn, and I'm sure you will do well in the position. Okay, after that, there's one more announcement. At the request of Jessica Elliott, the chair of the Open Space Environment and Parks Committee, I am going to announce that there's going to be an Earth Day event on Friday, April 22nd from 9:30 a.m. to 2 p.m. And it would be appreciated if as many of you as possible would attend, because it's going to be done in person and virtually. So you have a choice. If you require any additional information, please contact Jennifer and Jessica. I'm sorry, Jessica, and she will be glad to help. So that's all of the personal announcements from me. And now, basically, Welfare is a food nonprofit that distributes healthy groceries to residents in NYCHA public housing developments for free. Is Cole Riley here to give his presentation, Marlene?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Riley, the floor is yours.
Thanks, John. Hey, everybody. I am the founder of Welfare. We're a nonprofit in New York City, and I'm just going to give you a little kind of overview on what we do and what our plans are in East Harlem in the next couple of weeks. I'll drop in my contact info in the chat after, and if anybody wants to reach out and chat, please. So we started Welfare last year, and we launched in Bushwick. We work with the best food and beverage brands, distributors, and retailers across the country, many of which are in Whole Foods. And we work with them for in-kind donations of healthy, delicious products that we pack in a box and deliver to qualifying households in NYCHA public housing for free. We do these distributions every month, and we focus on categories that, as far as I can tell, are totally overlooked by other nonprofits. Healthy snacks, healthy drinks, healthy pantry goods, all packaged, all shelf stable, but healthier alternatives to stuff you find at the bodega. And what we see is that these products have an incredible impact on everybody in the household. Again, it's geared towards residents of public housing, many of which are on SNAP, but these are products that fuel up kids and working class moms and dads and senior citizens, and they're convenient and they're healthy. And at the end of the day, if it's one low sugar beverage can be swapped out from drinking another Coke or Sprite, that's a huge impact. And those are healthy swaps that we've been bringing in to residents in Bushwick for the past year. Now, our plan in the next 2 weeks on April 16th, Saturday, is to launch in East Harlem. We're going to be working alongside the EDC and launching out of La Marqueta. We've been working with the EDC in Bushwick, working out of Moore Street Market. And we're going to be targeting residents of Taft and Johnson houses to sign up. We'll be placing posters in the lobbies, passing out postcards the week of, and then residents can come down, learn more about our service, sign up. Again, it's a free service for anybody in those developments. And then starting in May, every month, people can pick up a box. Now, each box is roughly $200 worth of donated goods. We're going to be distributing every third Saturday of the month. Again, kind of gearing towards when those SNAP dollars start to run dry a little bit. And you got $200 worth of healthy pasta and plant-based milk and grab-and-go snacks and ready-to-drink low-sugar beverage. And alongside, there's some educational collateral that talks about some of the products, spotlights an ingredient, some type of functional ingredient, and brings in other value and other types of wraparound services from some of our partners. I want to be embedded in East Harlem. I want to work with as many stakeholders already in the neighborhood from the government side to schools like Success Academy and some of the public schools, to the hospitals, to other nonprofits, to Friends of La Marqueta. We want to work alongside, whether it's at our distribution outposts, getting the word out to new buildings and new families, just collaborating in our effort to bring more healthy food to neighborhoods that are frankly just oversaturated in high sugar, high salt, high fat products. So we're going to be launching in 2 weeks, April 16th. Like I said, I'll drop my contact info in the chat, and I'm happy to chat with anybody, talk a little bit more about our program. Our website is pretty rich and talks a lot about what we do. But if you're in the neighborhood on April 16th, come on down. We'll be there from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And you'll probably see some of our posters over the next 2 weeks in some of the lobbies and just around the neighborhood.
Thank you very much, Mr. Riley, for the information. Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, Candy. Yes, please. Please, Candy.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for that presentation information. So are you going to, okay, so you're starting April 16 for the Taft and Johnson from 10 to 2. And then you said something about May 16, or is it going to run into May?
So on April 16th, that's when residents can first discover us and then sign up. And then a month later, people can start picking up their boxes from La Marqueta. I think that date lands on that third Saturday. It's going to be every third Saturday. So that the first boxes will be going out May 21st. That's another Saturday. But April 16th is really designed as just purely a sign-up event.
But is this going to be permanent, or is this only temporarily?
We're going to be here. Our plan is to be here every month. You mean permitted, like where we set up?
Yeah, you're going to set up inside the Marqueta or outside?
We're going to be playing with a couple different locations. I think we're going to be right outside of the event space on 115th. I'm still trying to figure out what exactly we want to do. When we launched in Bushwick, we had around 400 people come up in 3 hours to our space, which is a couple canopies and tables. So I don't want to overcrowd that area. I know we got the event space right there. We could set up inside. We're going to be making that call over the next week, but working with the EDC, we don't need to get any additional permitting. It'll either be right inside or right outside of that event space.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Beverly?
Thank you, Chair. Cole, thank you for the presentation. It is something that's needed with healthy foods. That's not going to break anybody's budget. So you aiding in that is very well needed and appreciated. My question is that I know you're just working right now with NYCHA, and that's a big development in itself. But I know that the city may also own properties that they still rent out and stuff like that, and manage. And I want to know, HPD in particular, will you be able to, or is there any opportunity for you to reach out to those type of families and those, other than NYCHA, and help with them?
Yeah, so there's obviously like many populations that we're not reaching right away. Section 8 housing, people in and out of homeless shelters, people that are just on SNAP, the whole undocumented population that doesn't qualify for public housing, but is still enrolled in SNAP. We chose NYCHA as just a starting point, and specifically just these two developments. But expansion is definitely in our plans, not only to more developments, obviously in East Harlem, but outside of the NYCHA thing. For us, it's just a very simple way for us to start, land in a community, understand a very kind of, with developments, you understand how many apartments and how many residents there are, but it's certainly by no means the end all be all. But expansion beyond that is definitely in the plans for later this year to meet those other needs.
And one more question. Like I said, the service that you're providing is definitely needed, but also is needed is a teaching mechanism of teaching people how to eat better. So I'm hoping that when you give out the foods, that you give them some type of ideas or little pamphlets or something to teach people what's healthy foods and what's available out there within their community, even if it's coming from the bodegas, so it's good to help, but it's also even better to teach so it can continue on.
Totally. I totally agree. And that's at least the function of that collateral that we put inside each of the boxes, but it's also just baked into the products that we bring because they're so accessible. It's versus just a big, box of bok choy or radishes. These are like grab and go snacks and drinks. And especially with kids, they immediately gravitate to them, and they're low sugar alternatives to a soda, but they still have the fuzz. They're still great. So it's immediate kind of adoption of these healthier products. But we want to go another couple steps and talk about some of these ingredients, not just about the harm of sugar and salt and fat, but about some of these new functional ingredients that are just so overpriced in stores like Whole Foods. They're so out of reach from just the common consumer. What we can do is bring in the product and then educate about why these are better options, but also little kind of easy swaps you can make at a bodega. Don't reach for that Coke. That thing is a killer. And so definitely, I totally agree with New York City Health and Hospitals in Bushwick. We've been bringing in some recipes from them. They've got a whole kind of archive of healthy recipes. So we deliver that kind of on, just again, another piece of paper inside the box. We're partnered with Sweet Green across all of New York City. We're their exclusive nonprofit partner. So we bring in recipe ideas from Sweet Green and also coupons for free salad. So just as much value as we can provide, we try to include in this box.
Okay, thank you so very much for your answer.
Sure.
Dawn?
Thank you so much. And thank you for that presentation. I'm sure you probably know that we were at some point, if we still are not, a food desert.
Yeah.
And so it's good to have these options, realistic options for people, and not just more ways to shame people for not cooking from scratch from the farmer's market. I think that it's a lot more helpful to meet people where they are instead of telling them how they ought to live and they ought to cook from scratch, they ought to, ride bikes everywhere. It's refreshing for people to offer something quality that's not a judgment on how people deal with their poverty. So I just wondered, what demographics did you use to select those particular developments? Just curious, because we have the highest, well, people in Brooklyn will disagree, but I feel like we have the highest per capita public housing in the country. Yep. But is there some demographics you used to choose Taft and Johnson, or how did you come to that decision?
Yeah, certainly. So one kind of on the macro, why East Harlem? Well, the EDC asked us to come up there. I had the motivation to expand, to be able to bring our boxes to a second neighborhood this year. And they said, look, you've done some great work in collaboration with Moore Street Market in Bushwick. We'd love to have La Marqueta serve as a hub for you and serve this strip of public housing on 115th, but also eventually expand to the north and the south in East Harlem. The reason why we chose Taft and Johnson is purely just because of proximity. Where we're going to set up in the market, it's just the two most immediate developments, and just the eyeballs and the brand awareness that people have coming into that market and walking by. They'll see us, they'll sign up, and then we will naturally expand west and east to the two farther developments, and then north and south. So that's purely just out of like a practical reason. But to your earlier point, I totally agree. Our approach is rooted in practicality. Now, I totally understand the need for fresh greens and lettuce and tomatoes and potatoes and onions, and we can bring those in at our distributions down the line. But being able to bring in a 12-pack of healthy soda and bars and be able to just bring in practical, convenient nutrition is something that, like I said, a lot of nonprofits don't do, a lot of organizations overlook, and they really don't understand how the the common consumer, the common family feeds themselves. Whether in an affluent neighborhood or a lower income neighborhood, people need a couple goods that are packaged. And in addition, we're still bringing in stuff to cook with, like pastas and sauces and spreads, but it's a lot more practical, and it's totally not looking down on people. But yeah, that's kind of the answer, but our plan is definitely to expand beyond just Taft and Johnson.
I have one more.
Thank you. Dawn, you had anything else to say?
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I just had one more question because I was active with NYCHA in the last census, and I did a lot of work in Brooklyn, and I noticed that their developments are a little more spread out in some ways. So I'm just wondering, how do you turn people away? Like if people come from other developments, what do you tell them?
Well, if they're in NYCHA public housing, they get waitlisted. So we'll still onboard them and sign them up and ask them the questions if they want to. They may just be like, I'll come back later in a couple months. But we can just waitlist them. And then when we expand, we have already kind of a roll of names and emails. And we did that in Bushwick. We launched with a couple developments, we waitlisted another. Certainly it gets a little trickier if someone doesn't live in public housing, if they're in those other buckets I talked about. It is a little tough to turn people away, especially if you're on SNAP and you don't live in public housing. You live in a multifamily house on, wherever, 123rd, and but you're on SNAP or you're on WIC. That's a tough kind of conversation, but it's rooted in us trying to build something sustainable. That's not a great answer for someone that's standing there that needs the help, but we will shoot ourselves in the foot if we try to serve every single person and try to do every single type of product. So for now, it's just explaining to somebody that our growth plans, we can waitlist someone living in public housing, but it's definitely the bitter pill that we have to swallow, and it's certainly not ideal.
Okay, thank you. Alonzo?
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations again. And
Thank you.
Mr. Riley, for coming in to talk to us today. I have a question in regards to your sourcing. You may have mentioned this, but I may have missed it. I'm pretty sure you have a lot of vendors when you get your vegetables and the food items. We have a number of community gardens here in East Harlem. Do you accept vegetables and food items from other community sources like our community gardens?
We haven't yet. We haven't done produce at all, either in the box or outside the box at our distribution outposts, but I really, really want to. I've talked with Grow NYC, either for donations or to purchase wholesale. We work with Whole Foods, we're partnered with Whole Foods. So something like that, it's definitely been top of mind. Again, just to add value. The box is great, the practical products are great, but if we can bring in some greens, why not? People are there, they're ready, it's Saturday. Let's give a bag of greens alongside it. Like I said, I'll drop in my contact info if there's an opportunity to work together, even on like a small scale to start. I'm certainly interested, because we have those physical outposts. It's very easy for us to do it day of, bring in product day of and distribute. But in general, our procurement, like I said, we work directly with food brands, with distributors and retailers. Practically every single brand that's on the shelves of Whole Foods, we have a relationship with, and they have either inventory that has 3 months of shelf life and they can't sell it at a grocery store, or for many brands, they're just donating perfectly fine market-ready inventory because they want to work with an organization like ours. They want to get their products into more people's hands. So we're not dealing just with expired product, and we're not dealing with all these back channels and weird middlemen. We're working directly with these organizations, procuring healthier products, really at the same product standards of Whole Foods. But again, back to that point about community gardens and produce, I'm certainly interested in talking about it and how we can work together.
Great, thank you. Mr. Green, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Alonzo. Steph, you're next. We're going to move on after you because there's a presenter that has a time constraint.
Thank you, Chair. First and foremost, congratulations to you and Don. You guys are amazing. This sounds like a great program. I guess my question is, have you guys made contact with the TA presidents from both Johnson and Taft? And I don't know if I heard this and I may have missed this, but this is at no cost to the residents who have SNAP, or is there a cost?
It is free. It's free for anyone living in public housing in these developments that we launch with. It's a free service, whether they're on SNAP or not. But 92% of the residents that we serve are on SNAP. The other 8% are either on WIC or SSI. I've already talked to Ethel from Johnson. We've already gotten the okay to place posters in all those buildings. We'll be dropping off postcards that will be slipped underneath residents' doors, just announcing this sign-up event. Still trying to get in touch with the Taft houses, again, for the same thing, introduce the program and be able to advertise. But working with the TAs is critical because we just want to get the word out. Why not? It's really cool. And working with the management. But I still need help just connecting those dots with Taft.
So I know Beverly McFarland, I believe, is still the president at Taft, if that hasn't changed. And she usually comes to these meetings, but I believe John may have her contact. But I think it would be a good idea to reach out to the TA presidents because they are having their TA meetings. So they can also let residents know about it.
Totally. Okay, great.
Thank you, Stephen. Xavier?
Good evening. Thank you so much for being here. To Stephanie's question, yes, I've reached out to Beverly as well. And I'll follow up with her again to make sure you both connect. She was definitely interested. I appreciate you being here. This has been very informative. And I think the bigger thing is that we fill those silos that are unfulfilled within our community and bridge those gaps so we can provide more. Thank you so much for being there and presenting to this committee.
Yeah, thanks, Xavier. And thanks everybody for the questions and for hearing a little bit more about us. You can go to welfare.org with 2 L's and see a little bit more about our operation, what we've been up to and who we partner with. Where is that sourcing coming from? Who's supporting us? And I'll drop right now, William, in the chat, my contact info. And again, thanks everybody for hearing a little bit more about us.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. I wish you success and hope that we become partners in service.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, now we're going to go to presentations. First, NILAG is a leading civil legal services organization combating economic, racial, and social injustice by advocating for people experiencing poverty or in crisis. Are the presenters from NILAG here, Marlene?
Yes, they are.
Okay, Ms. Left, Mr. Walter, you have the floor.
Let me know if you all need to screen share.
You know what? Our presentation is a little too long for the time allotted anyway, but I'm happy to distribute it afterwards if people would like to take a look at it as a PDF. Hi, I'm Anna. Thank you so much for having me. And my colleague Miles is here as well. And we are attorneys with the NYCHA defense team at New York Legal Assistance Group, NILAG. And we're here to talk with you all about right to counsel at the NYCHA Office of Impartial Hearings, which is a venue that our team specializes in. Yes, we did present at the Residents to Preserve Public Housing, and that is how we were connected with this amazing group of people. So we wanted to talk just quickly with you about NYCHA Office of Impartial Hearings, what that means, and the type of work that we do, and then answer any questions that you might have about it. So as you may or may not know, right to counsel in New York City Housing Court was rolled out a few years ago. It began in housing court, eviction defense, in a few zip codes, and then eventually was fully implemented across the city. For NYCHA tenants who are facing eviction for anything other than just non-payment of rent, so nuisance allegations, breach of lease, etc., right to counsel began for them where it was only covering seniors, so people 62 or older at the Office of Impartial Hearings, because that's where those cases are held or heard. Then COVID happened, everything shut down at the Office of Impartial Hearings, no cases were heard. And this past fall, it all began to reopen there. For those cases, it's now been expanded to any NYCHA tenant who has a termination of tenancy case at the Office of Impartial Hearings. So what does that mean and why is that important? A lot of people hear the Office of Impartial Hearings, they think, well, that's still just at NYCHA, that's not housing court. I don't need to worry about that, right? You're getting called into so many meetings with management anyway, especially if you've gotten to the point where you have a termination of tenancy case, you've been called down to management, hopefully a few times. So you know it's coming, you think this is just another meeting. Actually, this is your place to be heard. What happens at the Office of Impartial Hearings has full authority over what happens in housing court. So if you settle your case at the Office of Impartial Hearings, you won't get a housing court case. If you go to trial at the Office of Impartial Hearings, so you have a full hearing, then that decision controls what happens in housing court, right? So if you lose at the Office of Impartial Hearings, housing court, they can only adopt that losing decision, if that makes sense. So it's really, really, really important that when tenants have these cases at the Office of Impartial Hearings, that they are represented by attorneys, right? They have an attorney with them, defending them the same way they would want in housing court. And that's what our team does. And actually, you know, providers across the city do as well. Our team is just the only team solely dedicated to working with NYCHA tenants and addressing the specific needs of this community. Miles, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. So, like Anna said, my name is Miles. I'm a staff attorney on the team. The thing that we're sort of trying to get the word out about right now is how these NYCHA tenants get hooked up with an attorney as part of their Office of Impartial Hearings case. NYCHA has been sending out letters to all residents who have pending termination cases, sort of inviting them to come to an intake appearance. Those are happening on Microsoft Teams, which, just like Zoom, allows folks to join in either by calling a phone number or by using a link and an app or a computer. Those appearances are where folks have the opportunity to be referred to a provider like our team and get help with their case moving forward. NYCHA, because also different than housing court, NYCHA gets to set all of its own procedures in the Office of Impartial Hearings. So unlike housing court, where a tenant can ask at pretty much any time in their case to be referred to counsel, and they will, you know, barring some extreme circumstances, get referred to counsel by the court. In the Office of Impartial Hearings, NYCHA has determined for the time being that tenants get 2 opportunities to come to these intake appearances. And if they do not, their case will move forward without representation. So we're really, really trying to get the word out in as many ways as possible, urging folks to watch for these notices and to actually go virtually to these appearances. We're only seeing, I think, about a 50% show up rate right now. And you know, we're crediting that mostly to NYCHA's confusion causing, right? So we really think the issue is not that folks don't want attorneys, that NYCHA is making it pretty difficult for them to connect with attorneys on purpose. And while we fight NYCHA on that, on the procedural front, we need to also get the word out to make sure as many folks are finding our services as possible. So the sort of short version is watch for a letter. It'll have a link to a Zoom note or a Microsoft Teams virtual meeting. and get to that meeting, whether it's by phone or by computer, and take the opportunity to speak with a legal services attorney.
Yeah, and just to add to what Miles was saying, we were on intake last week, and I asked the people from the Office of Impartial Hearings who are facilitating it, what is the engagement like, right? Because we're not on intake every time there's intake, and I don't know if it's just like the luck of the draw for us or what they're seeing across the board, because they're on it every day. And they said it's less than 50% engagement. And often when they are able to connect with tenants, it's because they'll call the tenant and the tenant picks up and they'll say, hey, do you want an attorney for your termination of tenancy case? And they'll say, oh yeah, sure. So it's not necessarily that the tenant is trying to avoid it, it's that they don't know. And another thing that we hear from a lot of clients after we've retained them is that they never actually are even getting the notice necessarily, which is like its own separate thing, right? But we do need the tenants who do get the notices to show up, because we want to help as many people as possible. It's very, I mean, it's like literally why we get out of bed and go to the office every day, is to help as many NYCHA tenants as possible. So that being said, that second part of it, the engagement aspect, you know, if anybody here has any ideas also about other ways that we can reach out to tenants and sort of circumvent NYCHA's messaging around this, because it's obviously not super effective, I would love to hear it. So if anybody ever has any ideas, any thoughts on other organizations we could present to or collaborate with, I'm going to put my information in the chat, and I would love to hear from you. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, we welcome them.
Thank you, Anna and Miles. Thank you very much. I have a question. I have missed part of it because my computer is acting weird again, so it's telling me that I should get a new one, but that's another matter for another day. I may have missed this, but how many NYCHA residents does NYLEG assist every year in East Harlem?
So we aren't location based at all, right? So all NYCHA tenants in the 5 boroughs who have termination hearings have to go through the Office of Impartial Hearings, which is currently at 803 Atlantic in Brooklyn. We get hooked up with residents through a meeting at OIH. So any resident in East Harlem with a termination case would be eligible for our the services of an attorney. And the way that they would do that is by going to their intake appointment and hooking up with whichever legal services provider is on duty that day.
Another question is, and I may have missed this as well. Is there a fee for your services?
No fee.
No.
Outrageous, great. I see there are a couple of committee members that have questions. Candy?
Yes, hi, good evening. Thanks for that presentation. And you know, how are you gonna get the word out even with community-based organizations, because they can be a very good instrumental component for you to do that outreach as well. So
Yeah.
are you reaching out to all the community-based organizations within the compoundments of the NYCHA developments?
Yeah.
We sure are, yeah. Go ahead, Anna.
So we have started reaching out to community-based organizations because, you know, our thought was from the beginning that nobody knows the NYCHA community better than the NYCHA community, right? So that's how we actually did the Residents to Preserve Public Housing presentation, and how we ended up here. We have started partnering with, with Goals, so Good Old Lower East Side, the Red Hook Initiative, Community Voices Heard. we would love any more suggestions that anybody has. I was just emailing with Raphael at the Harlem Community Justice Center to see if there was a way that we could work with them to sort of do some outreach. I know that HCJC isn't open right now. So I'm not quite sure what their status is, but if you have more suggestions about community-based organizations that we could connect with, we would absolutely love to do that.
Okay, my second question is, and then I'll yield to my colleagues. Is this just for rent termination purposes, or is this for succession rights? To those type of nature. So who are you representing? Who are your targeted population?
So Miles, do you want to answer?
Sure. So our team specifically and Rights Counsel at the Office of Impartial Hearings is for termination of tenancy proceedings. That is often the sort of everything but failure to pay rent, right? So it could be if it's a chronic rent delinquency, but we're dealing with most of the cases that you would maybe categorize as like lease violations or the like non-desirability, which is what they call it when someone doesn't meet a background check or has done something that usually leads to contact with the criminal justice system. We do take some of the succession remaining family member cases if we get referred by one of our NILAG teams that operates within the borough housing courts. But for this, the cases specifically at the Office of Impartial Hearings are not going to be like late rent. They're going to be more of those, you broke your lease and now we want to terminate your tenancy. But NILAG and Right to Counsel does cover all the non-payments too for NYCHA tenants as well. So it possibly wouldn't be me personally, but if you were to intersect with one of NILAG's intake days at housing court, you would be eligible for an attorney for a non-payment of rent case.
But my main concern is because we have a lot growing numbers of people who are living in the apartments, and even though they are breaking the lease because they're not on the lease, but they've been living there forever, right? And then the head of household passes away, and then they become homeless or potentially to be homeless unless they do an Article 78. So then, do you really, because in this way I'll know we can then send people over to you.
Yeah, so we do those cases, right? And a lot of times those a lot of times those cases start as if the leaseholder passes away or has to move out into assisted living, whatever it is, the person who's still there, NYCHA will bring a housing court holdover case against them saying like, oh, your permission to be in the house ended when this person left. Mm-hmm. And then that person will have the opportunity to start their remaining family member grievance. And that is something that we can jump in and help with. That's something that attorneys can do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And help preserve those defenses.
And yeah, to clarify what Miles is saying is we do that representation. So when our office connects with a tenant in housing court who has a remaining family member, has the licensee holdover in housing court and needs to start the remaining family member case at the Office of Impartial Hearings, our team takes on that representation and represents that client in RFMs. Because, RFMs are actually like, there was like one point before Right to Counsel, before I was at NILAG, I was at Neighborhood Defender Service, and I just took every RFM case that came through because it's true, right? Just because somebody's not on the household composition doesn't mean that that's not their home and that they haven't been living there. And that person not getting RFM status is just as displaced as somebody whose tenancy is terminated. So we take those cases when we can. I welcome if you know somebody who's in that situation. While I can't guarantee that we will take every single person who lands in my inbox because we have limited capacity. I mean, not too limited, but we're just like one set of people. I'm still happy to always talk to any tenants who have questions about their remaining family member grievance, explain the process to them. The rules recently changed, and I'm happy to talk that through with anybody, and talk about sort of like the best ways for them to navigate it. And if it is a time when, you know, we have more capacity, then we can also sometimes take the cases that just sort of like come through my email. But, you know, we have to take the cases that come through housing court and office of impartial hearing. So those have to get priority in terms of our capacity.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Dawn?
Thank you. I was just wondering, because I was at the presentation, I guess maybe it was like 3 or 4 Sundays ago, and it was excellent presentation. I would love for us to have a time to really understand everything that you do. But one thing that stood out to me, and I can't remember if Marquise, somebody emphasized this, the resident only has 2 chances to connect with you before going to court, right? They just have those 2 chances. And I just think that that's what stuck with me the most, is like, if people ignore the letters, they will end up in court, and it'll be easier if they came through you, right? Or something like that. If you could just emphasize.
Yeah, I think that that is a really important point, and thank you for this question, Dawn. So the way it's set up is, and NYCHA has set this up, right? Like the way the right to counsel law goes and the way NYCHA functions is that NYCHA is both our adversary, you know, the landlord, and they're the tribunal. So they're the judge and they're the landlord. And so they got to make the rules for how, because of their role as the tribunal, they got to make the rules for how right to counsel is implemented at the Office of Impartial Hearings. And they made the decision that right to counsel intake would be 2 appearances, 2 intake appearances that are separate from the ongoing case. So you only get these 2 times when you show up that you can be connected with an attorney. That isn't our choice, right? That's not how we think things should be functioning there. That's how NYCHA has decided to facilitate right to counsel. Now, if somebody misses their opportunities to connect with counsel at one of these 2 appearances, NYCHA will go ahead and they will schedule them for a conference pro se, which means a conference to proceed unrepresented by an attorney. If at that point, through community intake, through some other way, a NYCHA tenant retains an attorney, they can still show up with an attorney, but it's not going to be facilitated through right to counsel intake at that point. And frankly, a lot of providers are no longer doing community intake because the demands of right to counsel are so high right now after the eviction moratorium. So really the best way for NYCHA tenants to be connected with an attorney is to attend these conferences. And you only get 2 tries before NYCHA moves your case forward pro se. I just see in the chat, does it have to only be NYCHA tenants? So the Office of Impartial Hearings, where the team that Miles and I are on practices and appears, is only NYCHA tenants, but all tenants in New York City have a right to counsel in housing court now.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dawn. Steph?
Hi, thank you. I guess my question is, as you stated, when they receive the hearing letter, sometimes they don't receive it, and usually there's a time limit on when they can respond to the hearings, the NYCHA hearing letters. Do you help residents navigate when they miss a day or when they can't make it to the day and they need to reschedule it? And also, how soon in advance does the resident need to reach out to you if they know they have a hearing? Like, because again, if they don't receive the letter in time, or they're told about the letter and the hearing is in 2 days, are they able to reach out to you and say, hey, I have to go to this hearing in 2 days. Can you help me out?
So what they'll get, so it's a conference, not a hearing, just to be clear, which matters to the extent that at the conference, nobody's going to make any decision about what happened in your case. So that's important, right?
But the letter, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but the letter that they receive, does it say you have a NYCHA conference, or does it say you have a NYCHA hearing?
You have it, so it says both, right? It's not great messaging. But basically it says NYCHA has, scheduled a termination of tenancy. They want to terminate your tenancy. Here's the specification of charges, et cetera, et cetera. You have a right to counsel. If you want to connect with a legal services attorney free of charge, you can call in on this day at this time. Let's see, I can pull one up right now because I don't have it all memorized off the top of my head. So it says you have previously been served with letters from your property manager relating to the allegations of whatever date, and it attaches the specification of charges. And then it says that you have a right to counsel conference scheduled for this day and this time. And then it says, if you can't participate on this date, then you should call this number. So probably if somebody called me and they said that I got this letter, I can't appear on this date and this time, I would suggest to them that they call that number and they get scheduled for a new first appearance so that they keep their options for 2 appearances. But people can also call me, and that's probably the advice I would give generally.
So I received the letter, and unfortunately I receive it, and my meeting is in 2 days, but I'm okay with 2 days. I can make it. And I reach out to you or to your team, to your group, your organization for assistance. You guys are able to do that in 2 days, or would you advise the resident to reschedule and then?
No, I would advise you to go to the conference, because whoever is on intake that day, whichever legal service organization is on intake that day, will be able to connect with you.
Yeah, so those meetings that folks are getting the letters about they're called conferences, but these 2 specifically are like the only thing that happens there is that NYCHA, a legal services provider, and hopefully the tenant get on the call and they say, do you want a lawyer? Tenant hopefully says yes, and then conference is over. And then the representation, begins hopefully. So it doesn't, excuse me, it doesn't serve the tenant to get in touch with the legal services provider ahead of the date on that paper, for the most part, because you don't need representation before that, because that meeting, the only decision that gets made is, do you want a lawyer or not? So folks don't need to freak out about doing anything in advance of those meetings. If they can't make it, the one helpful thing would be to try and call in advance and reschedule so they don't lose an opportunity. But there's really very little that we're able to do ahead of that meeting where we get connected with a tenant.
Gotcha. Thank you, guys.
Marlene, are there any other hands raised?
No, I don't see any other hands raised, John.
Okay, Anna, Miles, thank you so much for the information. And I have your contact information, and I'll be contacting you in the near future. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Next on the docket is this. We talk about 421A, the property tax exemption that we were talking about last month. We will have 2 presentations concerning this. First, each presenter will have 15 minutes to speak and take questions. The first presenter will be Sam Stein from the Community Services Society. The second presenter will be Louis Holly Chu, who is the Housing Committee Director of the New York State Senate and a former community board member. Is Mr. Stein here, Marlene?
Yes, he is.
Mr. Stein, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Green. I do have a set of slides. Can I share my screen? Okay, let's try that. Okay, are you seeing those slides?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. I can't see you anymore. So if folks have questions or need me to slow down, please let me know. And I know we're a little bit behind schedule, so I will try to move quickly, but hopefully share useful information about 421A, which is also called Affordable New York. And the material that I'm going to share right now comes from two reports that I recently co-wrote with my coworker, Debbie Priya Chatterjee. We published at the Community Service Society. I can share the links for the full reports if anybody wants to read them afterward. So first, what is 421A? Sounds like you talked about it last month, so maybe this is an overview, but it's a state law that applies to New York City taxes, and it is a gigantic tax break for new development. It's available as of right to developers, which means they just have to build and they get the exemption. They don't have to show that they need it or anything like that. The majority of the housing that it produces is market rate housing. And that includes a lot of what's considered affordable housing. It rents at the same rates as market rate housing nearby, sometimes even more expensive than nearby market rate housing. The tax exemption can be a full tax exemption on the entire building, lasting as long as 35 years, which means that we'll still be paying for the 421A tax exemptions we gave out in 2022 in the year 2057. This program has a long history, and I'm not going to go through every step of this timeline, but it's important to note that it's been around in New York City for over 50 years. And when it was established in 1971, as many folks remember or know, New York City's housing market and real estate market looked quite different than it does right now. That was a time when the city's leaders and the state's leaders were worried that real estate developers wouldn't want to build in New York City, when a lot of people making more money were leaving New York and moving to the suburbs or to other cities in the South. It wasn't a time where you would think about gentrification and a lack of affordability as the problem. So that's when it was created, 1971, to solve a set of problems that really looks nothing like the problems that we have now in 2022. Along the way, the program was changed several times, 1974, 87, 2007, 2017. And they would try to fix something about it. They would either change the geographic targeting to incentivize development outside of Midtown Manhattan, or they would require that some affordable housing be built. At first, that housing could be built off-site in another neighborhood, and then later, by 2017, it had to be built on-site. The program is set to expire in June 2022, so this coming June. It could be renewed in the state budget that's being negotiated right now, though it looks like that's probably not going to happen. It could be replaced with another program that does something else, or it could be let expire, and we could then debate what we should do to incentivize the kind of housing production we want in the city. 421A costs New York City $1.7 billion in 2021, closer to $1.8 billion this year. And it costs the city an uncollected property tax revenue. So that's the amount of money that developers are not paying in taxes that they would otherwise be paying if they had built the building without 421A. Between the years 1990 and 2021, which is all the years that I could get data from the city, New York City has lost more than $22 billion to 421A. The cost of the program year to year has also exploded. In 1999, the program cost over 1,000 times less than it does today. And that's a result of a few things. It's a result of the city's property values going up. It's a result of a lot more development happening right now than then. And it's a result of a longer length of the tax exemption. It used to be much shorter at 15 years. Now it's up to 35 years. As of this year, over 90% of the 421A exemption since 2016, the last time the program was revised, have lasted for 35 years. So we will continue paying for all those exemptions, like I said, until 2057. 421A costs the city more than we pay for any other single housing cost. So like I said, in fiscal year 2021, the 421A tax benefit cost the city $1.7 billion in uncollected tax revenue. That's more than the city spends on HPD's capital budget, which is closer to 1.5 billion. It's more than the city spends on Section 8 vouchers for NYCHA or for HPD. It's more than we pay in operating costs for NYCHA. It's more than even the federal government pays in capital costs for NYCHA. It is the single largest housing expenditure on the budget for New York City. And yet, it doesn't really produce a lot of affordable housing. The housing that it produces is market rate housing for 70 to 75%. And then the affordable housing that it produces is mostly for families earning 130% of the area median income. I know as community board members, you're familiar with these numbers, but in case it needs to be said, the area median income is set by the federal government for the New York City metropolitan area. The average tenant household in East Harlem makes closer to 30% of the area median income. In this affordable housing, 3/4 of it went to families earning up to 130% of the area median income. I looked up the numbers for East Harlem before this presentation. In East Harlem, since 2016, the last time the law was renewed, there have been 67 units built with 421A. 21 of them are considered affordable, but all 21 of them were set aside for households making 130% of AMI, which, like I said, is more than 4 times the average East Harlem tenant makes in a year. So this is not affordable housing for East Harlem residents. And yet people still defend this program. This is the face of the head of the real estate board of New York. And I'm going to go through some of the ways that they defend it and what I would say in response. First of all, they say 421A is an affordable housing program. People like me are supposed to like affordable housing, right? Here's a chart of the kind of affordable housing that 421A has produced in its current form. No units for people who are extremely low income, 0 to 30 AMI. And like I said, the average tenant in East Harlem is in that range, not a single unit for those folks. 3/4 of the units are for people making 130% of AMI, and a few are spread in the middle. But this is really not creating affordable housing for many neighborhoods. In fact, 130% of AMI is more than the average tenant makes in all but I think 3 neighborhoods in New York City. So another justification for 421A. Developers say that land is too expensive in New York, and without 421A, developers can't even build market rate rental housing. So they need this full tax exemption for 35 years. The thing is, 421A has not brought down the cost of land, and arguably it's actually made it more expensive. This is a chart that explains how. Basically, what it says is the people who own land that's available for sale, they know that the developer will get this 421A tax exemption. And they know that because, like I said at the beginning, it's available as of right. And so they will charge more than they might have otherwise to sell their land to the developer, because the developer is going to get this big tax break from the city. So the developer is willing to pay more upfront for those long-term savings. But to pay more upfront, they're going to have to take out a bigger mortgage. They're going to have to raise more investment capital. That means they have more debt, and to pay back that debt, they're going to have to set their rents even higher or sell their condos for even more to pay back that debt. And then we're back to square one, where the developers say it's too expensive to build in New York. So 421A is kind of driving one of the problems that it claims to be fixing. Finally, people argue, and this one is actually true, ending 421A won't put $1.7 billion back into next year's budget. That is true. And why is that true? Because we have already committed many billions of dollars in tax giveaways that we're going to have to pay out or not collect, more like it, over the next 35 years. This is a chart of the rising costs of 421A. And you'll see it has risen to extremely high heights, and we will sort of be paying that off in a line that looks like the opposite of this one, so going down slowly over time. So it would be great if we, let this expire, and then next year we got $1.7 billion in our budget that we could use to shore up public housing or help people pay their rent or house the homeless. That's not the case. It will take 35 years for us to get all that money back. But that's not a reason to continue it. That's a reason to end it so that we can get that money back. If we continue it, we will never get this money back, and we will continue hemorrhaging money to 421A. So we need to stop it so that we can just not increase the amount of lost revenue every year, year after year after year. So my organization, the Community Service Society of New York, has argued for a long time that we should end 421A, not because it's too expensive. It's good that we are spending a lot of money on new housing development, and not because it subsidizes new and tall buildings. We don't prefer old buildings over new. We don't prefer short buildings over tall, but it's not building the kind of housing that New Yorkers really need. It's subsidizing mostly unaffordable housing. If it is an affordability program, it is incredibly inefficient. We could build so much more housing if we put $1.7 billion directly into financing the construction of fully affordable housing. It also locks in austerity politics. People in government will tell us, I'm sorry, we can't do all the things we need to do because we don't have enough money. Well, there's a lot of reasons why we don't have enough money, but one of them is that we've lost $22 billion to 421A over the last 30 years. So we are calling for this program to be ended. If we need a new tax exemption to stimulate rental development, it should be targeted to cover the affordable housing and then maybe a little bit of bonus to incentivize it, but not cover the entire building. There's no reason a building that's 30% affordable should be 100% tax exempt for decades. Or developers could show that they need it. They could open up their books to HPD, like it as in many other programs, and show that they couldn't build the project without 421A, and then it would be up to the city to say, yes, you get this, or no, you don't. We could also rebalance the tax code so that the burden wasn't so poorly distributed between very expensive condo owners who pay relatively little versus the owners of rental housing. All of these options would be better than simply continuing the status quo. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stein. Marlene, is Ms. Chu here?
Yes, she is.
Ms. Chu, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. Marlene, I also have slides to share, so I'm just gonna press the share screen. I think I'm able to do it. Let's see. Are you able to see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so So following Sam's, what he just laid out, so again, Hallie Chu, and I'm currently the Housing Committee Director for the State Senator Brian Kavanaugh, and some of you may know he's the chair of the state's Housing Committee. So definitely, you know, I'm speaking from the perspective of somebody who is working in the government. So you definitely heard Sam and CSS position on this program. What I'm going to do next is to kind of give an overview of, without really taking position necessarily, an overview of what the governor has proposed. And there's a program that is now called 485W, and a little bit of what happens with current 421A projects when they expire. So when the executive budget was proposed back in January, the governor had a new program in there, and it's called 485W because it amends that particular section. So it's a harder acronym to remember, but it's also called Affordable Neighborhoods for New Yorkers Tax Exemption program. So if you want to look it up, it's in the Alpha Part 2 of the budget. It's in the New York State budget website, and it's intended to replace the 421A program when it expires in June of this year. And the larger context is the governor also proposed a 5-year housing plan, and as part of that proposal is sort of laying out, you know, over the next 5 years, there's going to be investment on $25 billion for affordable housing and encouraging that, and just sort of like housing focused initiatives in general. And for this coming fiscal year, 22 to 23, there's 4.5 billion allocated for a lot of different housing topics, from, you know, rental projects to homeownership projects, to different, you know, supportive housing and just different goals and things you may have seen in the news. Specifically for Affordable Neighborhoods for New Yorkers, the ANNIE program, I guess we've been calling it, the executive is not estimating any fiscal impact directly to the state budget. So that doesn't mean it doesn't, you know, be heard from Sam that there is kind of fiscal implication, but directly for the budget, it doesn't necessarily cost the state anything to pay into it, I guess. So I'm basically just going to go through, so I have a couple of slides on what the program is. I'm just going to read through them. There are now three different options to this new program. So option A and B that you're seeing here are the two options available for rental projects. So option A applies to what they call larger rental projects of 30 or more units. These, and they're still, you know, just like 421A, they are still as of right if they meet certain criteria. And the benefit is a full tax exemption for 25 years with up to 3 years of pre-construction benefits. So if the project is under construction, there can be some exemption happening 3 years prior to when the building is built, and like year one starts with the actual, I guess, post-construction benefits. So under this, to qualify, there has to be at least 25% of the units designated as affordable housing. And the breakdown here is 10% of the units must be at 40% AMI or below, 10% of the units at 60% AMI or below, 5% of units at 80% AMI or below. And this averages out to 56% of affordability in terms of the AMI level. Again, I think different neighborhoods have different affordability and neighborhood median income. So there is just kind of consideration on how affordable it is for specific neighborhoods. And the one new change for this program is the units that are designated as affordable units under this option, they are going to be, these affordability requirements are permanent. So they don't change even after the tax exemption period ends. And same thing with the rent stabilization status. So these buildings with the AMI levels and the subject to rent stabilization, which also comes with things like their increases, is going to be according to Rent Guidelines Board, and the right to lease renewal, all of that will kind of continue beyond the actual tax exemption period. For the actual owner, there is the option to have an additional 10-year of exemption if the building itself, less than 12% of the square footage, is dedicated for non-residential. So it can have a community facility or a storefront, but it can't be more than 12% of the total square footage. And the 10-year additional exemption amount would be the percentage equal to the percentage of the building's affordability. And option B is also similar, is also for rental, but for smaller projects of fewer than 30 units. Same thing, 25 years of exemption period with 3 years of pre-construction benefits, but the AMI level is different. So for these option B buildings, they must have at least 20% of units to be at 90% AMI or below. And the affordability restriction for option B buildings is 35 years. So it's not an indefinite permanent affordability level, but there is these rents, the affordability isn't permanent, but the affordable units that are designated as such under the tax exemption period would be subject to rent stabilization, and then even after the tax exemption period ends, they would still remain under rent stabilization going forward. Same thing with the additional 10-year exemption. There is the option for eligible buildings to kind of have the, maybe a lower percentage of continued exemption based on the building's percentage of affordability. And there is, so 421A has, even currently, you can have projects that are home ownership. So option C in this governor's proposal program will cover co-op and condos. So it gives 40 years of full tax exemption, which will limit the affordability of, the income level of those who purchase the unit, along with the 3-year pre-construction benefits. And all of the units sold, both the initial sales when the building's brand new and you move people in, and when there's sales happening, during the exemption period. So people turn over, new buyers come in, everyone has to be at least 130% at or below 100%, 130% of area median income. And then the home buyers, so people who live in those units, must use it for their primary residence for at least 5 years. And then there is also the requirement for the building service employees of these co-ops and condos buildings. They must be paid prevailing wages. And all of these options, so these are options on building types, but the proposal, the program also has a kind of workers' wage standards that are laid out. So construction workers who work on these buildings, there is this range, as you can see, of kind of minimum wage depending on the project, where they're located. And also sort of the trigger point is when projects have certain number of units. And prime development area in this case means Manhattan everywhere. And then there are, so for the construction, there's the standard that you see here, but there are also alternative construction wage standards that the Commissioner of Labor at his or her discretion would be able to just set at different times for different projects. And then also for building service workers, so after the construction is done, people who work in these buildings must be paid prevailing wages for buildings with 30 or more units. But this requirement is waived or exempt for buildings that are 100% affordable. And that among that 100% affordability, if 50% of those affordable units are at 90% AMI or below. And for the first time, the program, the 421A and this continuation introduces an NWBE requirement. And I don't have a lot of details on that, but I know that this is a new thing. So that's the governor's proposal that is still being considered for the state budget process. We don't know if it's going to be included. And if it's not, I think there is going to be continued conversation about this proposal that the governor laid out in the rest of the legislative session in the state. So there are definitely, many different discussions and conversations around that. And that could either be decided this week, or it could be in the next few months and weeks, a lot of kind of feedback, recommendations. And I think as a committee, I think one of the actions you're considering is whether to take position on the program. That's the information. And then I'm sure you also have a lot of conversations and just thoughts into what positions you can take. And then I have switching gears a little bit to what happens when the current 421A building exemption ends. So generally for rental buildings, it depends on when a building is constructed. So June 30th, 2008 seems to be one of the points where there are different levels of protection. So if you are a 421A unit in a building that's built before June of 2008, the unit will expire, will be deregulated out of stabilization if it meets this criteria that at every single lease renewal, there has to be a notice that is in large enough font telling the tenant who is reviewing the lease renewal that this unit is subject to deregulation upon 421A expiration and at the expected date of that. If that doesn't happen, in theory, that's grounds to challenge it with New York State Homes and Community Renewal. NHCR can, in cases where there is a violation, the unit will be kind of ordered to remain stabilized going forward. Now, if a construction began after June 30th of 2008, generally these affordable units, the ones designated as affordable, would have rent stabilization status. And then generally also this stabilization term can be longer than the actual tax exemption period. So let's say a building has 25 years of tax exemption, but the actual rent stabilization time restriction is 35 years. In all of that 35 years, those units remain rent stabilized. And at the very end, if you move in at year 34 and you stay beyond year 35, that tenant at the expiration point, as long as they continue to live there, that unit remains under rent stabilization. So when that tenant moves out and the exemption period and the stabilization period completely expires, the next person that moves into the unit will most likely pay market rent. For homeownership building, oh, sorry, I forgot the third point. So there's not a lot of power for tenants in an expiring building. So a lot of the times it would depend on the owner. If they're willing to work with HPD, or if they need money for capital upgrades to work with HPD and other agency on financing, or getting further tax exemption for the property, that's really the point where it's possible for government to maybe place that building under some sort of regulation to preserve or introduce some new affordability regulation. Otherwise, because 421A is an asset right program with limited affordability period, upon expiration, there's not much tenants can do to maintain that affordability. Homeownership buildings are a little bit different in terms of the shareholders, or the shareholders of co-op or owners of condos. They can explore options for their own building, but there are no other option for tax exemption as long as the building's under 421A. So upon the building's 421A expiration, that's when that building can look for other options. One of them is a co-op and condo tax abatement program. Another tax exemption possibility is to work with the city to get Article 11 tax exemption. these are conversations the board needs to have with the government agency in charge. So HPD is usually the case. And also the board really need to communicate with their shareholders or their owners to know who is eligible, which unit will be able to get those abatement, and also plan ahead of time so that upon expiration, they're ready to go and apply for it. On the individual level, individual homeowners, if you're a senior, if you're qualified under the definition of disabled person, upon expiration of 421A, you can explore applying for senior citizens or disabled homeowners exemption. And that is on an individual basis, but it may offer some sort of affordability relief so that when the maintenance and carrying charges jump up a lot because the property tax portion kicks in, this benefit can sometimes maintain the homeowner's ability to stay. And then the last kind of new option is there has been a new state law. So now if you're co-op shareholders and you're senior, 62 years or above, you are now able to get a reverse mortgage. And co-op, that's new, but condo, you've already, for a long time been able to do that. So people who seek a reverse mortgage have to first complete housing counseling. And this is one type of loan product that can have a lot of scams. So I think the housing counseling part is to make sure that, people don't fall into scam, but as an option it's now open. So reverse mortgage, basically it's a kind of a equity conversion loan against your building, your unit. So that may also generate some money to continue living there. So yeah, so that's pretty much what happens. And then I have these lists of resources. So all these programs that I just talked about, there are links that you can look further into things because each of them, I'm just talking about them in a general sense, but specific to each building, each type, whether it's a 421A program, your building is in pre-28 or after 2015, all of that matters. So the best way is to kind of look at your own building before you make any decision. And I think I saw there's a surcharge. So that is the thing if you are in a rental building that was built prior to the 2016 version of 421A and living in a market unit, the 5 years leading up to when your property tax goes from fully exempt to phasing into 20, 40, 60, 80%, the landlord is allowed to charge you 2.2% of surcharge of your total rent. So the best thing is to go to this fact sheet because that is something that I've seen that are from buildings, people living in buildings that are nearing expiration, and sometimes they don't know what it is, but it is allowed, and it's newer 421A buildings no longer subject to that, but the ones that are expiring right now tend to be the ones that were built earlier and have this provision. So that's it from me. So I'll just stop sharing.
Thank you, Ms. Chu. And thank you as well, Mr. But Ms. Chu, I have a question. Now, the thing is that the options that you describe for owners of co-ops and condos, those options will allow them to maintain the rates that they pay for their now and prevent them from increasing?
Sorry, what do you mean the options, the rental options?
Yeah, yes. What you said that homeowners can do when 421A expires.
Oh, the homeownership version, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that it's still, so the timing, I think it's also very tricky. So when your home ownership like what I just went through, you know, if your 421A building is expiring, those are some of the options I laid out. But let's say this governor's proposal passes, or what the 485W version of home ownership, it just sort of kicked things further out. So the exemption period is 40 years instead of the usual, 20, 25 years. So presumably that is a longer exemption period. So if homeowner moves in, you have a longer period. Maybe, if you stay there for the full 40 years and you have a 30-year mortgage, that can make a difference, because if you paid off your mortgage and then the property tax amount kicks in, you can sort of, be free of one obligation, and then when your maintenance goes up because of the property taxes, you're no longer paying mortgage at the same time. So it's not that you're not going to be hit with increases of property taxes, but the timing, longer is better, but I think the timing may allow for some sort of, or like if you stay there 40 years and then you become a senior by the time your exemption period ends, you may then be able to qualify for SHE.
Okay, thank you. One other question. The thing is that, has the governor listed the terms of how the affordable neighborhoods for New Yorkers will ensure that the program's affordability requirements are expanded?
In terms of, so you're talking about rental right now, right?
Yeah. Now I'm talking about rental.
Right. So I work for the state legislature, so not from the governor's office. But so what we're all seeing right now, that is the governor's proposal. So you're seeing, the proposal is saying there's going to be permanent, affordability, meaning units that are designated as affordable units in a large project will have that designation forever. And included with that is the rent stabilization status. I mean, there can be arguments made whether that is, so I think that the larger conversation is, you are still, the foregone tax revenues, or the part that Sam laid out, like the part of the money that you're not seeing because you're giving these exemption, you can sort of see it as you're paying that money, or you're not receiving that money in order to buy affordability. Is that a good amount of affordability? Is it a good, thing to get back from what you don't pay? So that is a consideration. And again, with the governor's proposal, I think she laid out what she laid out, and that's kind of the starting point for different negotiations.
Because that's the most part that you're concerned with, because with all of this building of apartment buildings in New York City, the thing is very few of these apartments are truly affordable. The thing is that it's been more luxury housing that's being built because the developers have found a way to get around those requirements. So that's very important for the governor to make sure that these apartments, that new apartments that are built, are affordable.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Are there any other? I see. Dawn, you have a question?
Yes, and thank you so much for this presentation. I'm hoping we're going to get a copy of this so we can really digest all those details. Is that possible?
Yeah, I can send it to Angel and Marlene. And,
that would be great. Because now, I'm having flashbacks to tenant interim lease. Like, there are different projects that ended, and some I think ended in a sustainable way, and some did not end so well for small groups of residents, but still it was very problematic for them to leave those programs. So our hypothetical situation here is, if a person, because just as some background, like when I first started working with the city in the 90s, everything was home ownership. HPD wouldn't approve any projects unless it was a home ownership project. They wouldn't approve rental projects. So a lot of people bought in to this home ownership. A lot of people bought in, and they are not necessarily wealthy people, right? And so now that their 421A is expiring, some of them still have mortgages, right? So if you still have mortgage, and then your maintenance is going to take a hit, do you have to buy your own apartment back to get another 40 years? Like, how do you protect the investment that you've made so far if you still have a mortgage? Thank you.
Yeah, yep. That is, I hear you. I think that is in some ways like what Sam was talking about when he gave the history of 421A. Like it wasn't created as an affordable housing program. It was created as a program to incentivize development. So as affordability components got introduced over the years, you're still working from a base of a program that encourages development. So I think that encouraged a lot of homeownership development and people moved in, but I think you're seeing now, why it's, I guess, the reality of being in a building with a program that is not created from the beginning as an affordable program.
Yeah, and a condominium owner can't sell and rebuy and get a new 485W if that passes 40-year tax exemption, because that exemption applies to the building when it's first built. Like Hal is saying, the point is to subsidize new development. So 35 years later, there's no 421A or 485W to be had. They could apply for the co-op and condominium tax break, as Hallie said, or others, but they can't renew 421A for an individual apartment.
So I guess what I'm saying, because this kind of happened with tenant interim lease, sorry for the background noise. Are these homeowners are going to be displaced then? Is that what we're up against? Because that's really what we're concerned about, that on July 1st, the maintenance could go up to $2,000 on people who have a mortgage, and they will therefore be displaced by someone who can afford to buy their apartment after they've been with that building since it was built, and they've gone through all the trials and tribulations of that new construction, and now they have to sell to who? So that's why I guess that's what I'm trying to say, because even if it's just a few residents, even if it was just 10 residents being displaced, that's, for me, that's too much, So we're looking for solutions for the scenarios that we have currently, right? And we need those solutions to be part of this new budget. So I understand that people bought in to this system, but at the time in the 90s, late 90s, HPD was only doing home ownership. They didn't want to know if you wanted to rent. They only wanted you to do home ownership. They were only doing that. So now that we've shifted towards favoring rentals, we have all these people who bought into stabilizing their neighborhoods in this new construction. And I'm hoping, Mr. Kavanaugh, and I saw it in the chat, I'm hoping Mr. Kavanaugh and others will give us some solutions for our 600 lots that would be displaced.
If I can say one thing, I certainly hear the concern. I think that each of those cases needs to be addressed. I just want to make sure we understand that the expiration of 421A only applies to new developments. So anybody who has a 421A exemption and it is going to apply for another 25, 30 years, that's still going to apply. So the end of 421A is not going to affect ongoing 421A exemptions. And in fact, if we renew 421A, it still doesn't deal with the problem you're talking about. People's 421As will expire at the time when their individual building is no longer qualified. So these are important issues, but it's essential to note that even improving 421A or killing 421A or renewing 421A does not address what happens to tenants in buildings that got 421A and it's now expired.
Is that in writing somewhere? Because that's not clear, I think, for us.
Mr. Stein, I have a question. You have another question, Dawn?
No, I like what he just said, but I haven't seen that written anywhere. So I would rest a lot easier if I saw that somewhere.
I just wanted to follow up on something that you said, Dawn, but I'll wait until you finish.
No, I'm done. I yield to you.
Okay, thank you, Dawn.
And I think one thing, so just Dawn, to your point, I think the program description at various points sort of assigns an exemption period to a building. So one of the links in the resource page that I have at the end is just the DOF's website, and you can just Google, 421A DOF of buildings that are currently receiving. So DOF is the website where you can look up a building, whether it's receiving 421A and how many years. So while it's not explicitly written out the way that you mentioned, if my building is built in 2010 and I get a 25-year exemption, that will go for 25 years until 2035, regardless of whether 421A or 485W renews. So you go by the exemption period of the building.
So Ms. Chu, it's, in other words, if I moved in 2009, if I have 25 years, that means I have until like 2024.
Yeah, so your building at the conclusion of, so like whenever the 421A exemption starts, and this is for rental and for homeownership, the start year, year one, and then you kind of like, if you have a 20-year expiration, you count, down to year 20, that's when it expires.
Okay.
Right, but you're counting down from the year the building was built, not the year that you moved into it.
Oh, right.
It's not that each tenant gets 25 years or 35 years, it's that the building gets that period of time. Maybe you moved in at year 34 and you only enjoy 1 year of it.
Okay, I see. Okay, thank you. Beverly?
Yes, thank you. Thank you both for the presentation. I have a lot of concerns. As Dawn mentioned, the tenant interim lease program still have a lot of buildings that hasn't been done yet. And I know having a tax break for low income housing home ownership programs will be devastated if they don't get this, if this is going to start on with new buildings. And like I said, there's a lot of buildings that haven't been built yet under the TIL buildings, tenant interim lease programs. So I'm kind of confused and worried about our position now for buildings that still has not been redeveloped with these tax breaks. The 421, I'm not sure if you don't get the 421, do we apply for or are able to apply for the J51s? So these tax breaks, if it's not afforded to if it's going to be expired and it's not afforded to the new building constructions of the TIL buildings that's still left, that's going to be a problem because like Dawn said, these people have been waiting for these programs for over 25 years as it is now, so to have this type of worry now to come up is very disheartening. And I also see that most of this seems to be coming because the city is giving all these programs and benefits to developers. I don't see how the city is not maybe thinking of taking on their responsibility to build houses themselves, to cut all of this out. Because from your explanation is that they did this in 1971 to encourage developers to build housing, you know, and the way a developer will think on most parts is, you know, I'm going to try to find how I can make even more money, make more profit. You know, that's the nature of them. So I think the city should think about restructuring their idea on how houses are built and maybe start developing buildings themselves to cut all of this out for, you know, still give them developers that money, you know, that opportunity. But as we see in the predicament that we're in now, they're going crazy of getting even extra more money from the benefits that we was asking them to do for people of low income, you know, and how affordable housing. It's really wow. It's really wow. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing. Can I can maybe, one thing I do want to kind of clarify maybe. So I know the TIL program has been mentioned a few times. So TIL programs, they don't receive 421A even currently. So these are buildings that are already in existence, and through, you know, through the TIL program, which is, I think now, there's the TIL buildings have to be funneled into the ANCP pipeline to kind of renovate them. So renovate an existing building into a new HDFC. So these buildings are not new construction. So they have never been subject to or eligible for 421A tax exemption. What they do receive is the DAMP tax cap. So it is a cap on how much property tax each of the units pay. So if, let's say, the cap is $10 and your building without the cap would have, you know, your unit would have to pay $50 of taxes. Your $10 of taxes is the benefit of that tax cap. So it works differently. It's a different program, and it also has an expiration date. So I believe the DAMP expiration date is 2029, and that one, I think it would be the city council. I think they will have to pass a resolution to either extend it or you know, when the time comes to make a decision on what to do.
Okay.
So that is separate from 421A.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Beverly. Candy?
I saw Elsie had her hand up before me.
Oh, okay.
No, Candy's on the committee. Go ahead, Candy.
Now, my thing is that you know, if you guys are going to make a if you're redoing the whole, well, we're restructuring the 421A program, can we have some, you know, I feel that the community board, I've always, and I don't know anybody that's been on the land use committee with me, and I've seen that other private developers have come in that are actually doing unaffordable housing because it's not affordable for the rest of the residents in the community. And my criticism has always been that, you know, they circumvent the community board, which it really takes away from us from having any type of input as far as the affordability and what goes on in those development sites, that they only go straight to HPD. We have no input at all. And then when you see when they come over to us and they're giving us like maybe 5 apartments, you know, in the housing lottery, you know, to me, it's just like a slap in the face. Because at the end of the day, those still are tax dollars that are being utilized, and we should have an input to say what we would like to see in our community in shaping those programs and developments. You know, I feel that if we're gonna do this and you are reshaping it, that you're reforming or finding different languages for it, I think that everyone in every district that is being built on, you know, these private developers really should come to the community board before, not after the fact that it's already built and we have no say. We don't even know how many units are being distributed and how much each unit is going to cost for the affordable side that is more really of, you know, because affordable is being thrown out there like it's crazy, but it's not specifying, you know. So I just feel that with the 421A, even though it's a surplus for, you know, a bonus for the private developers, but I feel that it doesn't really, is a disservice to the rest of the community residents that are not getting any type of input into that. And, you know, I just feel that HPD should send them right back to the community board residents, you know, to the community board and the residents to have some type of say. I mean, at the, this is taxpayers' dollars, and we are paying for it too, you know, so their buildings are really more on the luxury side. And we would only get like maybe, I've asked before, how many do we actually get in our community for the past few years, you know, that we've benefited. And when I mean we, I mean the residents of East Harlem, you know. And so that's my biggest gripe right now, because I feel like we're being circumvented, and then they'll come to the community board with the lotteries for maybe 5 or 10 apartments. It's not good enough. So I just would like to see that we get some input into that, and some language should be added into that. That's all, that's my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Candy. Elsie, and then we have to move on because this it was light when this meeting started. It's dark now, so, but Elsie, go ahead.
I'm sorry, but I would like to speak after Elsie if possible.
This is getting rather long because we still have to deal with the resolution, and also we have another agency that's waiting to present.
Okay, so really quickly, I'll just say that, you know, I'm really grateful for the 2 presentations, because I feel like it delineated like 2 different avenues that we have to take. You know, like there's the 421A issue with itself as a program, and then there's also the issue of like the advocacy around the residents that are currently in that program, and how we can really get ahead of what is inevitably going to be, right, they're running out of this program. And so there's kind of like those 2 pieces that we have to look at. And from all that I hear, including what I'm hearing today about all of the anxiety around the program ending, it just seems like the program wasn't great to begin with, right? And then now we're going to be dealing with that. And if we have it in perpetuity, we're going to be dealing with it again and again and again and again. Never mind the lost tax revenue that actually could be going into the kind of affordable housing that we need, which we should call low income housing, right? Because it has to be income based in order for it to be affordable at any point. So I think, you know, there's definitely like 2 different sides to it where we really do. And I think, you know, Hallie, and hi Hallie, by the way, kind of pointed out about getting these residents, and they're easily identified, right? We know who's in the program, we know who's received the benefits, and really getting in front of them to help them transition out of that, the kind of cutoff of the abatement and the tax credit, so that we can assist them and give them some real help and some alternatives to those programs, and inform tenants, right? I think tenants are a lot of times in the residential piece and in the rental piece signing these leases, and they see these addendums and they're not really understanding what it means to sign, you know, something that has a low rent. They're looking at the rent and they're just really focusing on that. So I think it's really important for us to, 1, look at the program itself. I will be doing that on land use as well. This is a conversation that I want to continue in that, where we need to, yeah, we do need to stay strong on what it is that we need and what kind of programs are going to work. But I don't think, from what I've been hearing today and what I've been looking at as a whole for 421A, that we should really be behind extending a program that has really just really caused more issues than it fixed, because we're not getting the affordable units that are meeting the needs. When we do get affordable units in these buildings, they're studios, they're 1-bedrooms, they're not addressing the family units. So there's just a lot there that we should look at. And then we should also be looking at how do we help the residents that are in this program and will inevitably need the assistance and the advocacy to help them. So just wanted to put out there that, you know, I think it's 2 separate issues, and we really have to address both, because we really should be looking at programs more holistically for how they serve us. And when they're not serving us, we really shouldn't be promoting them any further. So that was my
Thank you, Elsie. Thank you for your input. Always appreciate it. Okay, But as I said, this meeting is getting long and we have one more presentation. Okay, CB11 received the mayor's response to the preliminary budget during February in 2022. The Housing Committee has invited representatives from the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development to this meeting to speak about the requests that were not funded. The committee would also like HPD to give an update regarding the Till buildings in East Harlem. Are the representatives from HPD here, Marlene?
Yes.
Okay, whenever you're ready, ladies and gentlemen, you have the floor.
Good evening. This is Sean Robin. I'm one of the presenters. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm joined by Ziamara Pedraza, and I know she would like to share her screen because we're going to do a 1-2 kind of presentation. So I don't know if you want to go ahead and great. And we're actually here on the second thing you said. I'm going to speak about Till, and she's going to speak about ANCP. We weren't aware of that other piece about things that weren't funded that you requested. So that's not what we'll address. But
okay.
So the tenant interim lease program. The tenant interim lease program was created in 1978 to assist in organizing tenant associations or TAs in city-owned buildings to develop economically self-sufficient low-income cooperatives where tenants have the opportunity to purchase their apartments. And I apologize if this is known by everyone. We just thought we would present a baseline so that we're all on the same page. So under this program, the TAs enter into a net lease with the city and are governed by the Articles of Association and the bylaws. The TA continues to operate and be governed by the Articles of Association and the bylaws until they're rehabilitated through the ANCP program. So tenants are given an opportunity basically to form an HDFC co-op. Now, the original Till program, which is often referenced, that actually ended in 2006, and that was targeted to when tenants were investing some sweat equity, and the original program only paid for very minor rehabs. The buildings today are frankly not in as great shape and require much more investment to really make them the way we'd like to see them. But under that original program, 950 buildings and 19,100 units were completed. Next slide. So the way the program works, the TAs have a number of responsibilities or areas that we check compliance on. And that includes, they basically manage the buildings on behalf of the city. They collect the rents. They submit a report every month, a financial report to us. They hold annual elections and they attend training classes. And what this HPD does is we cover the utility costs for the common areas. And then we provide additional funds and expertise while they're still in the Till, if there are any emergency repairs that go beyond what the TA can handle, based on the rents they've collected or et cetera. If it's beyond what the super can handle, things related to the boiler, for example, we frequently come in if there are any problems with the boiler. That's an example of a cost that we send one of our inspectors. We pay the full costs for those types of repairs if there are major boiler issues. And we also conduct periodic roof to cellar inspections, which I'll cover in the next slide. So this came out of a 2017 City Council hearing. We committed to doing periodic roof to cellar inspections where we would look to make sure we could identify any critical repair needs that can't wait until the full ANCP renovation happens. We weren't able to do those in 2020 and 2021 due to the pandemic, but we're actually about to start this spring and doing a fresh round of roof to cellars. We're giving priority to buildings that are not going to close and start renovations through ANCP this year. Once we finish that's fine. Well, once we finish the inspections, then we work with the TA to sort of come up with a plan to address the critical issues that came out of those inspections. So there's basically only 2 buildings remaining that are not sort of about to close into ANCP that are in your community board. So 2 East 127th Street and 102 East 98th Street. And we're just now scheduling, those inspections for the roof to cellar. So we expect they'll start. We don't have the dates yet. It'll either be this month or next month for both of those. And I know we also received 11 questions, which we wrote answers to, but we can answer those after both of our presentations to the extent that we didn't incorporate those answers into the presentation.
Okay, and hi, I'm Xiomara Pajaza. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Homeownership Opportunities and Preservation, which is a newly formed division in HPD's Office of Development. Also a former CB11 member, so nice to be here tonight. So I'll talk about the Affordable Neighborhood Cooperative Program. So ANCP selects qualified developers to rehab those TIL buildings that Sean was speaking about in order to create affordable cooperatives for low and moderate income households. And we provide low interest loans in city capital, in addition to construction and permanent financing sources provided by, but not limited to, institutional lenders and the New York State Affordable Housing Corporation, which provides AHC grants. And then all ANCP properties are currently owned by the City of New York. They're currently TIL buildings. They will be transferred to Restoring Communities HDFC upon construction loan closing. And then once the construction is complete, they're conveyed to a newly formed cooperative HDFC upon cooperative conversion. And the reason why they're transferred to Restoring Communities HDFC and not the developer is because we wanted to avoid any conflict of interest and to ensure that the developer had no stake so that it would convert to cooperative. So more on the ANCP model, it was first established in 2012 and it continues to today. The construction, HPD selects the qualified developer who responds to an RFQ or request for qualifications to scope the buildings, they prepare the plans, and they coordinate all the construction related work. It's typically a gut renovation. So like Sean was saying, the former TIL program did really like minor or moderate rehab. And this, we're now dealing with buildings who have been in city ownership for a long time and so require much more substantial rehabilitation. The funding sources, again, are city capital, private financing, and AHC grants. There's permanent debts, the permanent private and public debt, and enforcement mortgage. The sales prices for tenants who currently occupy the units are $2,500 to purchase their unit. And there's also a unit savings program. So for qualified tenants that are low income, their rent while they're relocated during the construction period goes into a separate savings account, which then goes towards paying that $2,500 insider sales price. The vacant units are sold typically between 80% and 120% AMI and are marketed through our Housing Connect online. The regulatory restrictions, there's a 30-year term. We have an owner occupancy requirement. So anyone who purchases their unit has to owner occupy for the 30 years. There's resale price and income restrictions. So there's a restriction on how much you can sell your unit for. And then also for those who are interested in buying units, there's income restrictions to maintain affordability. We require that there be a third-party property manager and a co-op monitor. And the property manager ensures that the maintenance and the operating of the building is going smoothly, and the co-op monitor is there to ensure that the co-op is in compliance with all of the regulatory requirements. We also require a 2% annual maintenance increase. There's also a flip tax on each sale per schedule. And those flip taxes are deposited into the operating reserves so that the cooperative is able to build reserves over time and use those reserves to maintain their building. And then there's also the annual reports to HPD. We provide an initial operating reserve of 6 months of the operating costs and 6 months of debt service once the building converts to cooperative, so that there is some reserve there in case anything happens that the cooperative can use. The building is required to make annual contributions into a capital reserve. And again, the flip tax is there to ensure a percentage of both share of the sales are deposited into that operating reserve. And this comes out of a lot of what we've learned from setting up HDFC co-ops over the years. And we believe it really helps the co-op maintain the building long-term. We also provide a full Article 11 tax exemption for 40 years. Again, sales prices are affordable to households that earn no more than 120% of area median income, and these are the sales prices of the vacant units. The maintenance is set at 40% of area median income, and existing residents are offered Section 8 when they return to their unit so that they can afford the 40% of AMI maintenance if they're unable to. So they're never paying more than 30% of their income towards that maintenance if they qualify. The sales prices are formulated, and we consider, creating opportunities at prices affordable to moderate income families, but also need to consider the financial viability of the development project and the marketability of the units available through the HPD lottery, right? So when we're setting those vacant unit sales prices, those sales proceeds from those vacant units also help bring down the debt so that the building is able to operate long-term. In terms of historic production in CB11, we've done 152 East 116th Street, which was 1 building and 9 units. And the developer sponsor was Elbario Operation Fight Back, which is a nonprofit organization. That construction completed in October of 2021, so recently. 4648 East 129th Street is another project which had 1 building and 10 units. And the sponsor developer there was HCCI. And that completed construction in August of 2018. And then we have the East Harlem Elbario CLT. And this is a unique project because it's a rental on a CLT. There's 4 buildings, 3 in CB11 and 38 units. 24 of those units are in CB11. And the sponsor developer there is Banana Kelly Community Improvement Association. And that building is still under construction. So this is a picture of 152 East 116th Street. You can see what the state of the building was prior to the construction. And during construction, you see so it's inside and then the outside of the building. And then the completed renovation, so inside one of the apartment units. And this just kind of demonstrates like the substantial rehabilitation that we see is typical in this program. And here's another example. This is 4648 East 129th Street. This is the outside of the building, and then inside during construction, some of the renovations in the kitchen and the bathroom, completed bathroom and kitchen. In our pipeline, this is a project in CB11 that will be closing soon on the construction loan. And the name of the project is 311-313 Pleasant Avenue Cluster. It's 3 buildings, there's 64 units, and 38 of those units are occupied. The sponsor developer here is also Banana Kelly Improvement Association, and the project is expected to close in spring of 2023. We anticipate the sales prices of the vacant units are going to be at 90% of AMI. But again, the occupied units will be sold at $2,500 regardless of the bedroom size. Okay, and that's our presentation. Any questions?
Thank you very much for the presentation. Are there any questions from the committee? Dawn?
I'm gonna be quick. I actually was trying to look up some history because my interaction with the TIL program was specific to Schaumburg, now Heritage, and East River Landing, which I think at some point was owned by Trump. And in those two cases, we really did not feel that the residents were properly supported. We were going directly to developers and asking for additional time. And I apologize that I don't have all the details, but can you tell us how this TIL program does not put residents in the same position as they were at the Schaumburg, now Heritage, and at East River Landing? If you can.
Can you be a little more specific in terms of what that you saw that you're concerned about? So
well, when Heritage was purchased, right? With the Schaumburg, which was, oh, Mr. Green, you have the details?
No, I do not.
Oh, okay, I thought you were saying. So maybe what I can do is if you put your information in the chat, I can follow up with you, because at the time, and I'll have to figure out the details, when the Schaumburg was being sold, right? A lot of people were displaced. I know how it was supposed to happen, but it did not happen that way. And current Senator Clear was there for that occasion. And we had, at the time, the office I was working in, there people were sobbing in our office daily. And so anyway, I just wanted to return to that, the history of how TIL has actually been managed and how it has affected our actual residents, right? So I'll find out some more information and I'll send you. I see your email is in the chat. I would like to focus on not repeating mistakes of the previous programs and how they impacted and displaced many tenants. So thanks.
So
Okay.
I guess before Sean, you answer, I think, so Schaumburg, if you're referring to those large buildings, what street is that on?
Fifth Avenue, 1295 Fifth, 1350 Fifth Avenue, right at the circle, the Duke Ellington traffic circle.
Yeah, so to my knowledge, those are not TIL buildings.
Not anymore. There were TIL tenants in those buildings.
Oh, were they relocated there?
They were pretty much had to leave. They had 2 or 3 years to leave. They were exited out of the TIL program without safety net. And that's why I brought this up earlier with the 421A. But again, I apologize because I did not have the details ready to ask you the appropriate questions. But when you go back, I know Anne Marie knows about that.
Can you give me the address also? I could also look it up.
Sure, I think it's 5 different addresses, but 1295 Fifth is the one that comes to me first, because that's the address that's used for emergencies and crimes and all kinds of things. So I think about that address first. But
okay, Dawn, is that it?
yes, sir. I just building on the themes of earlier, I like to be presented, like how it's supposed to work. But in my mind, going back 15 years, 20 years, I remember a lot of stress and strain And I just want to make sure that we are building upon what we've learned in the past in this neighborhood. But that's all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Beverly?
Thank you, Chair. Wow.
I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, even though I don't know the details, I just want to make one comment, which is that the programs that are currently in Till, any tenant who's tenant of record, as long as they're paying their rent, that tenant remains in the building will be renovated. Assuming it meets the conditions for ANTP, they will become a co-op owner, period. I mean, no one in the existing Till buildings are being evicted who are in compliance with those items that I talked about. I just want to be clear about that. Sorry, thank you, sorry.
Okay. I'm trying to hold my composure because your presentation has some half truths in it. My building is a Till building, and it's one that's listed. There's only 2 buildings that's left in Community Board 11 that has not been steered or coerced into the ANCP program. We were not aware that the program stopped in 2000, I believe you said 6. That never was told to us. 2008, when the housing crisis started, many of the Till buildings were in a pipeline with money already set aside for rehabilitation. Tenants had keys and leases for relocation apartments. The housing crisis came up 2008. We were told by HPD staff and directors of Till that the money was there for the rehabilitation of these buildings that was in the pipeline. Don't worry. So do not move anybody out. And 5 of the tenants are leased in my building would have been moved out and would have still been in a relocated apartment. Your presentation mixed 2 programs that were not of the ANCP program was not available in one of your presentations, as though you squeezed it in there, like it was part of the original Till, and that's not true. There has been no support for the buildings in the Till regarding repairs. Now, the ANCP program presentation showed 115 and 152 East 16th Street deteriorated conditions. A lot of that deterioration that happened there, as well as other Till buildings, is because of the lack of support and the lack of ability to rent vacant apartments for over 10 to 15 years to people of low income to have money in the reserve for management of these buildings. I was so proactive and a fan of the HPD Till program. You couldn't tell me this was, as its original program, was the best program for the ability of people of low income to be able to have home ownership opportunities in their community when Black and Puerto Ricans have been pushed out of that realm since we've been here, even us coming in here as slaves. So this Till program was an opportunity for us to own, operate buildings in our community, to pass on generational wealth to the families, to come out of low income and move up. The ANCP program does not address those problems. It is going to it does make it much more difficult. I've looked at your term sheets for the ANCP programs, buildings that you have completed. Most of the buildings, and very rarely any buildings that's finished your program, has the original tenants or the original tenant families in these buildings, which means these vacancies are going to tenants or prospective homeowners of a higher income. Low-income families are struggling for affordable housing. So for you to mix this program with a higher income under the ANCP program, it's going to be devastating and would stop the ability for these low-income families to come out of poverty and to have generational wealth. I hope that you send your presentation, that you your slides to the community board. Anyone that's on here, I hope you look at it again, and if you can even bring it up. I try to take some pictures to address some of the issues that you had mixing the two programs. I'm so my nerves is just wrecked right now about this presentation and how you're trying to make this seem that it's a good thing for the community and here in Community Board 11 or elsewhere for low income families, because it's not. The ANCP is not. You have a 10% minimum every year. People have, like I said, we've been in the program since 1997. 1997. Now you want us to have a debt for another 30 years. Unfair on all levels. The whole idea of a HDFC was to give low income families the opportunity of home ownership, because the state and the powers of be who came up with the HDFC knew that developers were not going to build houses for this community of people. The Till original program was the best shot for us people of low income getting generational wealth and be in control of their community without being priced out, kicked out, taken over by eminent domain, and having our cities and our little towns put underwater, as they have been doing throughout this country. So your ANCP program is not a helpful program for the people that are original to the Till original program. It is not beneficial to us. It's beneficial to the new monitors that you want to put in charge of us. Like I said, we've been in the program since 1997. We have more experience, if not the same experience, of these monitors and third-party management companies that you want to now put in charge of us. Because in essence, they will still be in charge of us. We don't really have that much say as to how to govern ourselves with these entities in our midst. My heart and my stomach is in knots right now based on this presentation. You spoke about the 2017 roof to cellar thing that you're doing. That roof to cellar whatever you're doing, whatever you want to call it, came about because the Till buildings came to the community board, the city council, to complain about the non-support for these tenant associations that's been in the program for over 20 years.
Excuse me, Beverly?
Yes, sir.
I understand your anxiety, but we really do have to move the meeting along. I apologize.
Okay, so my question to the presenters. We want 100% city capital money to fund the rehabilitation of the two buildings that's left in Community Board 11. 100%, no debt. That's what we want. That's what we deserve. That's what we work for. That's what we sign contracts for. Nothing, anything less than that is a slap in the face of the sweat equity that we put into this building. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethel. Are there any other questions? Hands raised, Marlene?
Oh, one more thing. I think we should have another meeting with the
sorry,
this
I was on mute.
percenters. I'm sorry. We should have another meeting with the percenters.
I apologize, I was on mute. I don't see other hands raised besides those in the attendees section, John.
Okay.
So Luisa Rodriguez with her hand up.
Yes.
In the
I
attendee,
fully,
John wants to recognize the attendee section.
Okay.
could I speak now? This is Luisa Rodriguez.
One moment. Okay, now.
Okay, I fully agree with Beverly's comments. And I think what is very important.
Ma'am.
Yes.
The
Yes.
thing is that, one, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this because it needs to be said. The thing is that the people from HPD came to give an update. Now, I know you may not agree, some of you may not agree with it, but the thing is that it's a thing where I feel that they've been accused of it, and I know some of you have gripes and things like that, but this was actually, and I will apologize, because the thing is I shouldn't have not have let that go on, because they were just here to give an update, not to they may not be able to address particular situations. That should have been done at a later date, and I will apologize for that now. But what I am going to do is that I'm going to end this section of the meeting now. We're going to continue. Mr. Robin, Ms. Pedraza, I thank you for your updates, and again, I apologize.
That's all right. I did just want to address, I mean, I think we responded to the questions, and I think some of this came up in those lists of questions where we responded to, but the reason we can't use 100% capital is because some of the costs are not capitally eligible. So there's certain rules that govern how we can spend capital dollars according to statutory requirements. And so that private debt comes in and the AHC grants come in and help cover some of those costs that we cannot cover using city capital alone. And just the substantial renovations needs, it helps to have other sources in there to kind of help subsidize the costs. But for HPD's capital loan, there's no debt payments for the entirety of the loan terms. So just putting that out there as well. And then I think there was a comment about no original tenants in the buildings we've completed. That's just factually incorrect. There are original tenants in those buildings. The original tenants in buildings are relocated during construction, and then they come back to the building once it's completed construction.
Okay, again, Mr. Robin, Ms. Pedraza, thank you so much. And again, I apologize.
No need to apologize. Thank you for inviting us, and thank you for all the feedback.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, going on, that is the last presentation, I believe. Yes. Old business. Yes, here we go. A resolution regarding the 421A tax exemption was written after the last housing committee meeting. The resolution has been distributed to the members of this committee for review. Each committee member will have an opportunity to speak about the existing resolution and vote. Okay. Members of, Housing Committee? And who has any comments or questions or Dawn?
I'm so sorry to be nibbling, but in light of the two presentations that I got today and having some additional questions, I feel like I need to really study what was presented today, because my understanding is that 421A cannot be continued for existing 421A folks, but that they have two options, including co-op and condo tax abatement program, Article 11 tax exemption, reverse mortgages, and I took some other notes. So I kind of feel like I have a lot more information now, and that the resolution would take on more meaning if we included all of the information we got today. But that's just me.
That's a reasonable statement, and in a way I agree. It's a lot of information to digest. It's a lot of options that are available to renters and homeowners, and since this resolution is going to represent what this community board represents, this community board period. The thing is that I want it to be proper, and I want it to be, and I want everybody to give well-informed opinions when we put this resolution together. So I feel I have a lot to digest as well. The thing is that I've been reading on newspaper articles and other things as well, and so I feel that that I cannot be an informed person to adopt and vote on a resolution at this time myself. Now, are there any other members of the committee that feel the same way?
Candy has her hand raised, Tom.
Candy?
Feel the same way, and thank you for bringing that up, Dawn, because I was ready to mention the same thing. You know, I've been sending you also articles. I've been reading up on it since Judith brought it up. I know that it was coming towards, an expiration, and you get caught up with so many things going on with the changes with housing because of COVID, that this was, it was like not such a rush to get into at the moment, but this is something that really I've been always complaining about for the longest time. This is our opportunity right now to, stand behind the support for or not. But if so, we need to put it in a way that it's going to be beneficial to the residents of the community where developments are going to be built at. It's a lot to digest, and to I think we will have a moment of opportunity, if not just also work with the new, because now it's new numbers, 485W, which sounds like a good plan. And honestly, I like Senator Kavanaugh. If you've never, dealt with him at all, he's a great housing advocate in all levels. And he's a fair man. He has two ears. He listens with both ears. It's not a one-sided thing. And, I think that the way it's being crafted and the way it's being said, I agree with you both. I'm not for it right now.
Thank you, Candy. It's a thing where it's like I said, this resolution represents Community Board 11, and Community Board 11 represents the residents of the community. So I wanted to be right from beginning to end. So I don't feel comfortable basically trying to flesh out a resolution tonight. I'd rather be better informed on this issue. And I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but I feel that we should table this one more time and make sure that we have it right. Now, as I said, I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but if you have any whether you agree or disagree, please let me know. This is This is your chance to state how you feel.
John, you have 2 hands raised from Dawn and Candy.
Okay, Dawn?
I just want to add one more thing, that is that we're not alone in this. And I just wanted to, if the committee wants to do this, I would like to also approach Assembly Member Harvey Epstein, who's also on the Housing Committee, I think on the Assembly side. Back in the day, because I live in the past, Candy can tell you I live in the past. Back in the day,
We both do.
when we had legal aid.
Don't feel bad. It was pretty good back then.
We had legal aid right on 106, and that's where people could go for all their housing issues, including commercial real estate, all types of issues. And the head of that legal aid was Harvey Epstein, who is now the Assembly member for, I think, a little farther downtown. But I have been emailing with him and said, listen, I hear where Candy's coming from with Brian Kavanaugh, because he's a great person. But I also feel like, Harvey knows when HPD was like getting at us and not letting us do our community management programs. Like Harvey was fighting for us. So I wrote to him, I said, listen, he knows that in the past, people were pushed into home ownership without the safety net that the developer has, right, when the time expires. And so he did tell me to let him know, like, if he can be helpful in any way. And I know perhaps with him, because he has the history of East Harlem in terms of our fights, right? And again, I apologize that, we were kind of hard on HPD. HPD knows why. I used to work at HPD. They know to expect a little bit of pushback, but the things that happened with the Schaumburg Till residents and East River residents, I told myself I could never let that happen again. And I just really need to make sure that this new iteration of Till does not devastate those people who fall through the cracks. Like, I know overall the programs are good, but to see those families that got displaced after 20, 30 years at Schaumburg or at East River, it just was not okay, So I apologize that I'm a little skeptical. I used to work at HPD. I'm very skeptical because not everybody I work with was on the same level as Ms. Pedraza and our other speaker. But again, if the committee wants, I will go forth and ask Assemblymember Epstein to kind of like look into the past of what we had to go through, right? And help us craft something that's like a solution. Up to you guys.
Okay, Don, listen, don't feel bad. Listen, I worked for the city for 37 years, and I can be somewhat skeptical of the city of New York myself. So don't feel bad. Candy?
I just want to say that, while doing development, we always keep in mind and doing affordable, but really for the working very low income families. So I don't want to sound like I'm being conflicted, but you just know the difference, and you want to be providing fair housing for everybody, because it is a right. But when it comes to coming into the community, the developers really have to be, especially the private ones that are just not thinking about, we're just coming in and yeah, we're going to gentrify it and yeah, we're going to change everything, whether they like it or not. And that's an unfriendly attitude where they don't even come to us. And we have to put in language that has to be done, because you're coming into our neighborhood. And we've done a lot of sweat equity and time. So all the language should be provided in there, and we should take that opportunity to do that, if anything.
I
That's all.
I agree, Candy.
I just want to be an open discussion about that piece there. I don't want to sound conflicting.
No problem. The thing is that we should be advocates for people who want to remain here, and as whether they're a homeowner or a renter, because we are their advocate in that regard. And anybody else has any other statement, any comments to make? Beverly.
Yes, in regards to the 421A, I think we should table it and come back to it, because we did get a lot of useful information that needs to be incorporated in this resolution. My question in regards to the resolutions that I know y'all been doing for a whole long time as a community board is what happens next? Because some of our resolutions don't seem to have enough teeth where they really paying us any mind. And I would like that to change. I really would like that to change, because private and profit organizations are getting the best of this community. They're getting a lot of benefits of tax breaks and whatever benefits they get from the city, or and they know how to maneuver around where they get even more. We are, like you said, like it's been said, a volunteer organization, but we do advocate for the people in our community on all levels, rentals and homeowners. So I don't know what can be done where our resolutions are really taken to heart by the organizations that it's directed to. I just need to see more of that. I'm sorry that in regards to the presentation of HPD, I understand, John, you were saying that it was informational, but we need to bring that back up, because there were people in the audience that needed to give testimony as to that would contradict what HPD was saying. So I hope that we're able to do that later. But for this, we should bring this back and add the information that we have been presented with, because it was very good information, especially the presentation by Mr. Robin. No, I'm sorry, the gentleman's
Stein?
name, Mr. Stein. Yes, it was outstanding, showing the comparison and the money. This is something I wanted HPD to do for the TIL buildings in the ANCP program, because it gives you more context when you see figures, So yeah, let's table this. I would definitely say that we table this to bring our resolution to have more teeth to it.
Okay, thank you, Beverly. Xavier?
Hi, all. Thank you very much for a very productive evening. I know that a lot of this is at best very wonky policy, but it plays a huge part in how we deal with our day-to-day lives. I definitely agree with the committee and its general direction. I would recommend dissecting the 421A and the governor's plan, seeing where the bifurcations are when it comes to those that are rolling out of the program and those that are renters versus homeowners, and then how we can determine a position that will best benefit current residents and future development, and how that will work simultaneously. So I think, again, pulling those bits and pieces out and looking for the stopgap that needs to be filled for those that are concerned with the program, that those that have reached the time limit, and how we can best help those, and then also to ensuring that we're not just giving, throwing away dollars, so to speak. So I appreciate the efforts of this committee, and look forward to seeing positions taken at the next committee meeting. So I look forward to, hopefully we're either in person, if not, we're virtual, depending on the EO. So thank you very much, everyone. And congrats, John and Dawn, on your new positions.
Thank you, Xavier. Okay, what I'm going to do now is there anyone that wants to make a motion on tabling the discussion of this resolution? Candy?
Yeah, I motion that we table the draft resolution regarding the expiration of the 421A tax abatement until further discussion within the committee members. And
Thank you, Candy. Is there a second?
I second.
Beverly? Okay,
Yeah,
thank
yes.
you. Okay, Marlene, do your thing.
Stephanie Arroyo.
Yes.
John Green,
Aye.
Robert Harvey,
Aye.
Alonzo Johnson.
Yes.
Are you voting to table the resolution to next month?
I bring to table the resolution.
Okay, thank you. Beverly Pabon,
Yes.
Dawn Sanders,
Oh, yes.
Candy Vivas Vasquez.
Yes.
Motion carries, John.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, Dave.
Just to clarify, in case any of the members here or the members of the public have any questions, this was a motion to lay on the table under Robert's Rules of Order. It does not need to be brought before the full board. It will be presented as informational purposes only, just so that people are aware and wondering why there may not be an actionable item. So just want to let people know in case there are questions of the full board. That's all. So thank you, everyone.
Steph?
Oh, I guess my question, and I may have missed it, but we're gonna get the presentation that they gave us for the 420 money, right?
Could you repeat that again, Steph?
Are they gonna provide us, are they gonna email to you guys and then email to us the presentation that they just gave us?
I believe so. I believe it was requested.
I'm sorry, John, may I ask Stephanie? It's pretty loud where you are, Stephanie.
Sorry, I'm trying to get dinner before I get home. Sorry.
It's fine. So the question that you're asking is the 421A information will be sent to you guys, the presentations. So if that's what you're asking, Samuel Stein put the link in the chat. So his presentation is in the chat, and Hallie Chu is going to send it subsequent to this committee meeting. And for the TIL presentations, that's going to be sent to the board office as well subsequent to this meeting.
Okay, thank you, Marlene. Okay, okay, so let's see, that completes old business. Is there any new business? Crickets, yes, okay. Well, that means there's only two things left. Marlene, if everything is done, could you call roll, please?
Yes. Stephanie Arroyo.
I'm sorry, we're calling roll?
Roll, yes.
Here.
Roger Flores. John Green.
Here.
Robert Harvey.
Here.
Jada Heredia. Alonzo Johnson.
Here.
Robin Krinsky. Beverly Pabon.
Present.
Dawn Sanders.
Here.
And Candy Vivas Vasquez.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody, for attending the meeting. Thank you, committee, for your work tonight. And I will see you all next month. And I proclaim this meeting adjourned at 9:31 p.m. Good night, all.
Good night, everyone. Great
Shalom
meeting.
and good night, everyone.
Shalom, great meeting.
Definitely. Oh, I saved the chat, so I'll look through the transcript.
Oh, okay, Don.
I'll send everyone the link in the chat. No worries, guys. I'll send the link.
Oh, okay.
Oh, awesome.
Thank you, Marlene.
Sure.